Welcome back to Garden Talk, brought to you by the Penn State Erie County Extension Master Gardeners. Again, today I'm your co-host, Mike Bailey, along with Ellen DePlacido. Ellen, are you with us?
I am. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Hey, last couple of times we've talked about, different approaches to gardening, some standard things and some
hmm
raised beds and stuff like that. This time we want to talk about what people call vertical gardening. And it kind of falls into two different categories when you talk about vertical gardening. And we're going to talk about both of them and try to present some of the good points and the weaker points of each of those particular
hmm
approaches.
hmm
And so that you kind of know that they're out there and you might want to use some of these options, around your home. First of all,
Okay.
let me talk about one of them, and then Ellen's going to jump in and talk about the other. Or
Okay.
no, it was going to be
It
reversed,
was
wasn't
going to
it,
be the
Ellen?
other way.
Here I am getting
Hey, I'm ready
confused.
for what
I'm getting
I'm
confused.
ready for whatever, Mike.
Go ahead and start, Ellen. I'll be quiet.
Okay. Well, we want to talk about two different methods and give you a little pros and cons. And the first one's going to be what we call maybe a hanging garden boxes or pots along a vertical wall. That vertical wall could be on a garage or a shed. Maybe your house. I'm not so sure about that. But any other like independent structure you might have, maybe a privacy fence that could double as a support structure for these containers. Okay. And there aren't a lot of plants, I don't feel, that you could actually plant in one of these structures because of the weight and other things that you have to add the soil and all that. But you might be able to plant some greens or some small flowers, maybe even some strawberries because they like to vine. But you have to look at the pros and cons of doing this. If you're able to spend a lot of time, yes, they'll look very nice and people will love it. But some of the pros are is that they are very attractive. And they do help eliminate rabbit and groundhog damage and other animals that might like to eat on the roots of the plants. We have a little list of cons that are a little more expensive than the pros. And that first one is that it's kind of labor intensive. Remember, the heat is going to kind of hit that fence or that structure. So there's going to be a lot of watering and fertilizing that's needed because as you water, some of that fertilizer is going to run off too. So you have to watch that. So it's kind of labor intensive. Um, so it takes time and a lot of, as Mike calls it, ingenuity to plan a system that's structurally sound and it's able to hold the containers and I feel also would remain attractive once you start watering and fertilizing it. You want it to stay as attractive as it was when you first planted it or built it. And you also have to do some research to determine exactly how these containers should be designed, how big, um, how deep, how far apart. So it's not just that you're going to stick some containers up on a wall and start planting. And the last thing is, once you want to start, it could be expensive depending on whether or not you have the structure there and you have to buy the boxes, you have to buy the soil and the plants. So you want to think about that too when you're planning something like this. But it's nice. I mean, people do appreciate walking by these structures and noticing how attractive they can be.
Well,
What do you
Ellen,
think, Mike?
that's a wonderful summary. Thank you so very much. And now
Okay.
let me talk about the other little component of vertical gardening, and that's where we're
Okay.
talking about garden uh, garden plants that are natural viners, um, and that would like some support. And I'm talking about pole beans, peas, cucumbers,
hmm
even tomatoes that can be, supported on some kind of a vertical structure, like a fence, like a teepee, like
hmm
an arbor,
hmm
or anything like that, anything that you can imagine, okay, to help get these plants up and off the ground and get them to, grow in a vertical manner. And some of the pros about that are, you really increase the productivity on a per foot basis, because the plants, grow upwards. Okay, you don't have, say, for example, the beans. Okay, traditional bush beans, okay, they take up a lot of space on the ground, individual plants. But with a pole structure or with a some kind of a fencing structure, you can plant individual beans along that fence, and they'll climb up that thing, and you'll get a lot of vegetative growth if you do it right, and you'll get a lot of productivity out of that. It also kind of keeps the plants and the fruit clean and pest free and disease free because you get a lot of air circulation around these plants when they're grown vertically, and it makes the fruit easy to pick. Ellen keeps reminding of that. She says, I don't have to bend. I don't have to bend over." Yeah,
Right.
you're
I'm
you're
getting
right.
older.
Okay, it's so much easier to pick the beans and the peas and the other things. And cucumbers are so much more visible, okay, when they're growing up on a support system like that, especially a fence. Uh, you know, some of the drawbacks, it takes a little bit of imagination. Okay, you got to kind of think about how you're going to do this. You got to kind of plan this early in the season. You have to kind of start. You plan for vertical gardening. You don't all of a sudden halfway through the growth of a plant,
Right.
decide I'm going to put in some vertical structures. No, you need to do it. You need to do it from day one, and
Right.
you got to pay some close attention to the watering, the fertilization, and those supports need to be sturdy because what happens, and it happened to us a couple of times, didn't it, Ellen, where we used TPs where we didn't kind of you know support them into the ground good enough. We had a lot of rain one day, and then the wind came, and guess what happened to the TP? It tipped over. And then you end up with a mess because you got to kind of kind of reposition that, and
Right.
it's not as easy
Right.
as you might think. But I tell you what, getting those cucumbers and tying the tomatoes up along a fence, uh, it takes a little bit of extra time. But I tell you, the increase in productivity, and how it's going to function for you in the ease of gardening is so much worth it. Okay,
Right.
we
Right.
we do as much vertical garden as we possibly can. Right, Ellen?
hmm
Okay, very good.
Right.
Go ahead.
Do we have any time?
We're
I would just
running.
like to
Go ahead.
real okay. A couple cons, and I wouldn't say this to make people think twice about using vertical supports because we do it. We do it. Sometimes your initial investment, because we've kind of gone over the top with our arbors and things like that. If you want to do that, that could be a con, but you don't have to use arbors. And sometimes storing them over the non-growing season might be a problem if you don't have enough storage area. But other than that, it's the best way to go.
Excellent points. Okay, and Ellen, we've used up our time for today, so thank you for listening, and I hope you're with us next time. Thank you. Now.
Thank you.